Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining our very first CEO series. Today's theme is the story of leading CEO on socio-economic transformation. So welcome to BMF Free State webinar on CEO series. My name is Lily Mwarbi and I will be hosting for today. Welcome to everybody who's just joined us, and please feel free to share the link with the others. We can still allow more registration at this moment so that we can have more people join us. I've got with me a great panel. Today we are going to have a very, very interesting discussion. We have a very special guest today who will be joining us, and he will be sharing his life story with us today. So it's going to be fantastic. I want to acknowledge all the people that have joined us, particularly let me respect all the protocol for all the MECs that have joined us. Thank you very much for making time to join us on this interesting series where we are going to talk about socio-economic transformation. So I will start first by reading the link, the bio apology for Mr. Fani Titi, who is our special guest for today. So Mama Melo, can you please display his bio so that everybody can see as I read about this interesting leader that who is our guest for today? All right,
please.
Yes, are you winning? Can you display his bio? Colleagues, please type your name and details in the chat box. If you have any questions and answers, please type them in the question and answer section, and then we will address them at the end of the panel. Right. Mr. Fani Titi, Group Chief Executive of Investec Group, leads an international banking and wealth business with primary operations in South Africa and the United Kingdom, and a presence in financial capitals across the globe. Mr. Fani's professional involvement with Investec began in 2002 when he was joined the Investec Limited board. He went on to serve as a non-executive chair of the Investec Group from 2011 until 2018, then as joint CEO alongside Mr. du Toit in the lead up to the successful demerger of Investec Asset Management business, which was separately listed as 91 in March 2020. Prior to his executive role at Investec, Mr. Fani was a founding member of the private investment group Kagiso Trust, and later co-founded Kagiso Media Limited, where as the chief executive officer, he led public offering on the JSE. He subsequently founded the TISO Group, where he serves as an executive chair until 2008. And oversaw the merger of the two investment entities to form Kagiso TISO Holdings. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting further time, let me hand over to Mr. Fani Titi to give us a little story about his life. Thank you.
Thank you, Lily, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm joining you from our offices in London. I'm sure you can see the background of the City of London behind me. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to talk to you. I think there's a mistake in that bio. The last line was a mistake. The Kagiso TISO measure, I think that happened post my departure, but hey, everything else sounded right. I had prepared a slightly different brief which I thought, talking to the Black Management Forum, that I would focus primarily on the professional side of my life. But to try and do justice to the ask, born 60 years ago on the farms of the Free State in the area called Wynberg, and during the days of separate development in 1974, we relocated, as was the policy of the apartheid government in the 50s, 60s, 70s, that people of color should be separated on the basis of language and heritage. So as a Mosotho, Rilara Raya Kwakwa in 1974, and I grew up in a village there, Ebitswang Makhalaneng. So there may well be some people who are aware of Kwakwa, and the village of Makhalaneng went to school at Kwakwa Senior Primary, and then went on to Tukwana, where it's JC, after which I completed my matric at Silelekela. So really bred, as it were, in Kwakwa, and got a lot of my own training and perspective on life there. I came from a family of 14 kids, 5 of whom passed on early. Given poverty, as you know, mortality rate is quite high. And 8 of my siblings are still alive. I have 3 step brothers and sister who are still, in fact, 4, 3 plus 1, 4 who are still alive, and we continue to be a pretty large family. I, at 60, have a daughter and 2 grandchildren. So my outlook on life, as it were, is colored by the desire to hopefully contribute to creating a prosperous country that the future generations can benefit from. I qualified as a mathematics student, did a BSc degree at Forte, mathematics, physics, and applied mathematics, and did a mathematics master's degree at the University of California, Berkeley, in the middle 80s, and then taught for approximately 5 years, taught at the Kwakwa branch of the University of the North Mathematics, and decided after 5 years that I wanted to go into business. So went to Wits Business School in the early 90s, 91 to be specific, and did an MBA there, which I completed in 1992 and started working at Rand Merchant Bank. This is where I wanted to start the discussion, because I thought I'm talking to members of the Black Management Forum. This area of my life would be interesting. So I've broken my professional life into 4 stanzas, or let me just call it 4 chapters. The first chapter, which I call the early years, starts in 1992 and goes on to 1994. So have just pivoted from teaching mathematics. I've just completed an MBA, and I go into the world of work, and I start off at the Rand Merchant Bank in the trading division of that bank. That division traded bonds, government bonds. You will know about E168. You'll know about you have a number of these names. The monikers R is normally for the Republic of South Africa, the bonds. So supported the desk, the trading desk, and then moved on thereafter to the Development Bank of South Africa, still working within the what is normally called the capital markets. Ultimately, in 1994, moved on to the Kagiso Trust, where we formed and started a totally new business that Lily spoke about. So in these early years, the search, and this is important for younger people, the search for me was to really get to develop my skill and then get to develop my confidence as a business person, as a professional, and also get to discover my passion, because in life you have to try and match your skill with your passion and try to be relevant and also find something that fulfills your greater purpose. That, I think, is what younger people should look for probably in the first 5 years or so of their lives. And while I moved from RMB to the Development Bank to Kagiso, I am really happy that I did that, because I was looking for an environment that could be the most fertile ground for me to be able to develop myself and to make a contribution. So that's the early years. In the early 90s, being a person of color and being in corporate South Africa was not easy. Firstly, you had to fight for respect, because there was a general assumption that you don't know much. We don't come from families of business people. We don't come from families where our dads and our moms were corporate leaders, as it were. So fighting for respect, fighting for belonging in those early years was quite tough. And in fact, in the early 90s, as you know, there were negotiations for the establishment of the democratic state. In fact, white corporate South Africa at that time would talk of the government as they, as if business, or in fact, that part of our population was not part of the country. So when you are part of the they in any business, it really becomes quite difficult. So as we build our business within Investec, one of the most important values that we espouse is a value relating to belonging, inclusion, and diversity. So this is really important, and for young people, you have to understand how important it is to fight for your space. So that's the first years, the early years. The second chapter of my career is between 1994 and 2001, what I call the foundation building years. I had obviously at that time come into the investment world, and I knew instantly that this is the area of work that I enjoy, that I would be good at. So I found my passion, matched my skill, and pursued building a track record, and pursued really making a contribution and making an impact. So my core skills are in investment management, and the other important aspect of the early days at Kagiso Trust was that Eric Molobi, who founded KTI at the time, had an unquestioned trust in me and my co-founding director, JJ Njake. And that makes a great difference, because when you start, it is really quite tough. We had very little money to build a business. So knowing that we were trusted by our shareholder and our leader in Eric was really particularly important. So in whatever you do as a young person, as a young executive, if you can find an environment that is supportive, that can imbue trust on you, allow you to learn, allow you to make mistakes, allow you to build a track record, stay in that environment and really make the best out of it. So at Kagiso, I began to build a market presence that the skills and contribution I would make would be noticed, felt, recognized by others within the market. So the track record that we were building there included, for instance, the purchase of some assets, including a publishing business, including radio stations. Coming from the Free State, you may know of OFM. We were the first private owners of OFM in the late 90s. We also owned at that time East Coast Radio. We also owned Jacaranda FM. Jacaranda is in the Johannesburg Northern Province area. East Coast is in the Durban area. So with that success, we started really building quite a powerful business, and ultimately we listed that business on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange in the late 90s. I was the first chief executive of this listed media business, and obviously we did well. Our driving desire as a Black business at the time was obviously to be the best we can be, to be excellent in what we did, and to obviously make an impact within the media market, within the listed environment in South Africa, and really excel at what we do. So in this period, I also made some mistakes. As anyone who has achieved anything will tell you, they do make mistakes. I was impatient as a young person, left Kagiso too early because I thought my progress was not as fast as it could be. Impatience can be a virtue, but it also can be a distracting feature. So I moved on from there into, and I'll move on as such, into the third stanza of my professional career, and that is the period 2001 to 2008, the period where we started our own business, a business called Tiso Capital, with two of my friends, a guy called Nkunku Sawazi and a Ghanaian professional called David Adamako. Raised 7.5 million rand from Investec to start a business. Again, an investment business. As I said, that's where I excelled the most. So as we did so, we began to build more and more of a market presence, a recognition from all and sundry that we were good at what we did and that we were making a significant contribution. And in fact, we were bringing not only a Black voice into the market, but Black ownership and Black leadership. So we were invested in quite a diversity of business at the time. And our business was one of the best within the environment. What was striking in the early 2000s was that the period of Black economic empowerment and affirmative action was obviously quite an important drive from the government to foster change. But it was important equally as Black professionals at the time that we had the best skills possible, firstly. Secondly, that we were ethical in dealing. While a lot of us think of issues around state capture as having started in the times of President Jacob Zuma, the truth is there was a lot of influence peddling even earlier than that, because the economy needed to change, that certain people could peddle their influence and proximity to power. So it is important as young people to really have a skill you can contribute, to be ethical in how you build a business, and in fact to think about building a business that could be globally recognized. So now I move to the fourth stanza of my career, being where I am today as a banker, and that starts in 2008. As I said, I cashed in my chips from Tiso, and my partners continued the business and ultimately merged it with the Kagiso Trust to form the Kagiso Tiso Holdings. So at that time, I was at a crossroad in my life. About 45 years old, I had done a lot of things in my life. I had made some money, and I had built a name. Corporate South Africa knew who I was. The Johannesburg Stock Exchange knew who I was. I had run a business. I sat on a number of boards of listed companies, and the crossroad was where I continue doing what I do, being part of an investment business with a level of influence, but a limited level of influence, or do I become part of a larger organization that has more power in terms of capital, more power in terms of the number of people that work in the business and where the business also operates. So I decided, instead of going into a smaller world, that I would be part of the investor group, not on the board as a non-executive, but as a chief executive running the business. So this was a particularly fundamental transformation. At that time, we had more than 10,000 employees. Our balance sheet was about, say, 45, 46, in fact, about 46 billion in South Africa, and a similar amount in London. Assets in South Africa, a balance sheet size of about 500 billion rand. As a business, we had assets under management of well over a trillion rand at that time. So I decided this is a business that I would like to work on. So the idea was go private or go big and make an impact. And that's what drove my decision there. So looking for scale, we were looking for significance. I was looking for global impact. As the bio said, our business has offices around the world. I'm sitting in London here, where we have half of our balance sheet, 45% of our profits come from this business. In the last year, we generated over 10 billion rand of after-tax profits. As I say, 45% of our profits come here. That's why I'm addressing you from London. You can see the city in the background. I'm sitting at my desk, so it's an interesting seat to have the ability to run a company listed on the London Stock Exchange and on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, 8,200 employees, because we made some changes to the strategy of the business, including the demerger of the asset management business, now called 91, run by Hendrik. So the lessons from this era, this fourth stanza, are that you have to have grit and discipline. You have to apply yourself to gain the respect of your colleagues, to gain the respect of the markets, and to make the contribution that you can make. And I must say, this grit, determination, and discipline is a trait, I think, that we learned as a family from my mother. My mother couldn't read or write, but she was a disciplinarian. She was very serious about taking a task on and completing it, about accountability, about responsibility. So grit and discipline and determination is important as a young person, as an executive, as somebody who wants to effectively change the world. In my current capacity, I also serve on the United Nations Global Investors in Sustainable Development. The defining issue of our day is climate change, and with it, sustainability generally. So I'm part of 30 chief executives from around the world who helped the United Nations in mobilizing support for sustainability and investment in sustainability. You know, in our country, that we are trying to transition from coal and Eskom in its current state to more renewable energy, more dependable energy, and an Eskom that is more reliable and more successful. So that's part of the opportunity that I have. The second thing I learned is this issue of application. That if you're going to be good at what you do, if you're going to be very successful, you really have to take your work and your responsibility seriously and apply yourself every single day. Initially, what you do may not seem to be important, but you will be recognized for your application and dedication. Over time, you become a lot more impactful. Where I am now, I run a large international corporation, so it is easier to see what that impact is. But in everything you do today, make sure you do it to the best of your ability. You also need to, and I mean, this is what I learned from Eric Molobi at Kagiso Trust. Despite the fact that Kagiso started off as an NGO, when I got there, having worked at RMD and worked at the Development Bank, I was astounded that at about 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, most of the workers at this place were still there and grafting. That was impressive. So this idea of applying yourself consistently, diligently is really important, because it helps you to build your skills to make a contribution. The third thing I learned was that you have to be optimistic. Building a business, running a business, and making impact, doing anything of importance and significance requires a level of optimism. The odds are always stacked against you. If, as an example, you take on the role of a chief executive, necessarily, you need to be optimistic. There will always be challenges. In today's world, we have inflation. We have, in South Africa's case, high unemployment. We've got low growth rate. We've got problems with the like of Eskom. We have a number of our municipalities and government generally that is struggling. So to lead in any organization, whether public or private, you require a healthy dose of optimism, a belief that you can make a difference and you can make an impact. And lastly, what you learn is, given the enormity of the task, you need courage, you need conviction, and you need the ability to take and to make tough decisions, even when those decisions could get you into trouble. I mean, you know, the complaint and the gripe we have against our president, somebody who's my friend, somebody that I know very well, somebody that I respect, somebody who's clean in terms of his ethics, but we haven't really made the tough calls that we require. In my case, as an example, decided when I took over the business that we needed to exit our Australian business because we didn't have the scale. In Australia, we had about 500 people making some money, but losing it from time to time. Over a 20-year period, we had not really made any money or build a business of scale. The decision to exit Australia was difficult. I remember talking to my colleagues in Australia in 2020 in the middle of COVID at about 4 a.m. On Zoom, because I couldn't travel to Sydney, telling them we are exiting the business. So you really need the courage to make the decisions and to go through with them. So closing and exiting Australia was difficult. As an example, we needed to restructure our bank here in the UK and cut out 10% of the staff because we were not making the returns we needed. I remember again sitting with our colleagues, there were about close on 200 of our colleagues we needed to part with. And even today, these decisions continue to haunt me as a person. But I have no doubt that had we not made those decisions, our business would be in a poorer state. So understanding what needs to be done, being convicted about what needs to be done, and having the courage to make those decisions is always better and leads to progress. And progress is not painless. Progress is hard. So these are some of the lessons that I have learned. I'll just go through them again. Grit and discipline, which I credit to my mom. A sense of application, which I would credit to Eric and my colleagues at Kagiso in those days, exemplary. Optimism, which I would credit to my dad. By the way, my mom and my dad were uneducated. My mom couldn't read or write. My dad had only 2 years of schooling, as you would expect with people who were born in the 20s in apartheid South Africa. But you learn a lot from them. So I'd like to wrap it up here with respect to talking about my career. So at the moment I'm 60. I think I'd like to do what I'm doing for probably the next 3, 5, 6 years or so, because I believe there is more that we can do. Firstly, to build this business. Second, to continue to make the impact that we're making, contributing to the growth of South Africa, contributing to the growth of the UK, and also supporting the countries where we do have operations. Impact is what is really important. Earlier this evening, one of my colleagues who runs our wealth and investment business retired after 35 years. And while he was said to be retiring, I said to him, the business you have built over 35 years remains. The people you have touched will remain, and this business will continue. And that is your legacy and monument. I think as you grow older and you have a lot behind you, the question to ask is what impact, what difference are you making for others? So I'll end it there, and we probably can go into the next stage that deals with socio-economic transformation. Msebetsi, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fani. Wow,
Thank you.
I am so impressed, and I am so proud of you. You know, you are a true definition of a BMF member. You have BMF DNA inside of you. Okay, I'll now hand over to our provincial chair, Mr. Dladla, who will then be interacting with you on socio-economic transformation. Mr. Dladla, are you ready?
All right, thank you, Deputy Chairperson. It's quite a fascinating story. You know, you can be told about the Defani Diti. Earlier on, I was telling him, for the past 22 years, I was told to be like him. We share a common person in our life, one of the very brilliant people I came across and met, and someone who was never afraid of meeting people that are trying to do well. This part of the session, colleagues, I think it will be more us discussing the fundamental problem that we face. I'm happy that Defaniti said he comes from a family of 14. I'm sure he used to sleep on the floor. That I can be sure.
True.
Which is the socio aspect.
True.
Now, maybe to the first part of our discussion that Defaniti is one. How do people that come from the environments we come from as Black people manage the aspect of impatience?
Manage the aspect of?
Impatience. We come from this extreme poverty and we just want to make it. What would you advise? I think you mentioned the issue to say you also suffered from that at some point.
Yeah.
And we see it often today in South Africa.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, impatience is a virtue, because if you're not impatient, you likely will stand for something that you shouldn't stand for, in terms of tolerating things either done to you or slow progress. But I think as managers and leaders, there has to be an appreciation of the value of time, that with time, with application and perseverance, you learn, you develop skill. Most of you will have read a book by Malcolm Gladwell. That book is called Outliers. And it talks about people across disciplines, whether they be sport, business, philanthropy, and many different professions. And his central theme is that you need approximately 10 years of application in an area to get a skill, or 10,000 hours of training and preparation to gain a skill. So patience is about understanding the need for application over time to become an expert and to become a world changer. But as I say, it's a virtue to be impatient because it allows you to push for progress. But if you are too impatient and you don't understand the value of time, the development of mastery is something that is really important. So you have to understand those two sides of it. Impatience because you want to push for change, patience because you want to gain mastery and to gain influence and to gain the ability to impact and to influence. I hope that helps.
I think I'll take from that. That's why my take is a lot of young people, I think probably my generation, you would not be given much option. So you found from your early life, you worked for someone. Today, you see with most people in their 20s wanting to start their business. They still come from the same family you came from. I think we want to cover the aspect of the social aspect of where we come from. And how do we begin to move those hurdles? Because as you said, the situation that you might have had when you started out, we still have it. Most young Black kids either would not have both parents, would not have one of the parents, and might not even have someone who had been in corporate. How do you think today we should be able to maneuver that. And what would be how you survived that? You said to us, your parents never went to school, but you went to university in America and all of those. How does one manage that when you come from that?
I'm going to think as a person, I believe in the power of the human spirit. While my dad was not educated, nor my mother, but they had this burning desire as parents to make sure that their kids would have a life better than themselves. So in our case, my father was a strong believer in education as a potential outlet from poverty. And my mother equally supported us with respect to instilling a sense of duty and discipline at an early stage. So for a child in a shack, and I can tell you, I lived in a shack until I completed my matric and I went to university. I know what it is to have many siblings living in what could be 2 or 3 beds. In some cases, you live in a shack and you have a curtain to divide 2 rooms. So I know what that is like, but I really believe that in every one of us, there is this urge and a desire for improvement, a desire for progress, and an innate understanding of the sacrifices that need to be made. So in the case of my father, we understood that we needed to try education, and my mother enforced it. She was enforced. While I remember around 75, 76, we would go to Kokwa Primary School. My sister and I at that time were the only kids who did not have any shoes in winter. And you know how the winters are in Kokwa. But if you have a desire from the perspective of a family, and you can get a little bit of guidance, as it were, you can push through difficult situations. I think as professionals, our responsibility is not only to ourselves, but our responsibility is to be that voice of encouragement for a kid who comes from a poor family. Look at my own story, that my story was a story that looked hopeless, but not without possibility. And in particular, I think what the Black Management Forum does, and I applaud you for it, is you set up these support groups and institutions that are able to support young people and young managers as they navigate the world of work, and to keep encouraging them that it'll get better despite how difficult it can be in corporate South Africa as essentially a minority within senior leadership, as it were. So the sense of a desire for improvement, and in particular, a commitment to education for every single family. Education is the most sustainable way of transforming any community, because you gain skills, you gain respect. I think education and contribution gives you respect. When we look at transformation, you can look at representation as a measure, and we need to make sure that we have the right demographics. But even more important, we've got to look for contribution, because representation without contribution does not lead to the kind of progress that Black people need to make in business, in society. So education is important. Advancement of these individuals in terms of gaining skills is important. So from families, you need guidance, you need support, you need a level of discipline at an early stage to try and get kids to move forward, a level of hope that despite how poor the circumstances are, you can make progress. From businesses, we require investment in skills. As an example, Investec invests the highest amount per capita of profit in the banking industry, because we have this fundamental belief that we have to invest in our people, we have to invest in skills in the country. In fact, when we lose people, in particular Black people, while we are sad about it, we are glad that they've gone through our university a school of learning, and they can make a contribution through to society. For government, we really require better institutions. They require better education. For me, if you have some level of health, good health, to support the poor, some level of electricity that is sustainable, where, I mean, in my case, I learned using candles, okay? That gives you a lot of strain on your eyesight, as you know, but we are here where we are because we did what we could do. So for government, basic infrastructure around electricity provision, water provision, health provision, and then I would then set a set of objectives around each of these areas in terms of what we need to produce, and let the best people run it. Because that way, over a 20, 30-year period, our country should be better than what it is. In 40 years, I'm 60 now, at 20, I was completely hopeless, no confidence, a fear of the future. At 60, there is no semblance to that past that I had. And we have been able to pull with us a big part of the family. And the single most important will be the role that my parents played, different as it were, poor as they were, uneducated as they were. Second is the opportunity in business, particularly early on given, and the trust bestowed on me by Eric to give me the confidence, to give me the opportunity to learn. So business has to provide that opportunity. So you guys from the BMF are right in asking for the opportunity to be at the table and to learn and to lead. It really is important. And for government, as I say, just get the basics right and get out of it. So that, for me, transformation moves far further than representativity and diversity to the opportunity to make a contribution, to build your self-esteem, to build your own wealth, to even own businesses, and far more fundamentally, that what you do makes a difference to the ordinary person in a village because you do it to the best of your ability. And also, particularly from Black business perspectives, we have to understand that our skills have to be globally competitive. My daughter, my grandchild, essentially competes with a child in China, a child in the US, a child in Singapore. So when we think about the future of our country, both from a government, business, and from professional organizations like yourselves, we have to rethink what the goal is. Is the goal to be part of a small business where we are not producing much? I mean, small business is important, but I'm just saying, as executive managers, can we be global in our thinking, in the quality of our skills? That is important.
I think that definitely I capture you well. It moves us now to one element in the triple BE, socio-economic transformation.
Yeah.
Now, my question would be one. Would you say, in hindsight, it was wise for the Black communities, as we then had affirmative action and BE, to lose those role models? By one, most Black affluent people don't use the services they run. I think Dr. Mangena mentioned it.
Yeah.
We are teachers, but our kids don't go to the schools where we teach. We are doctors, but we don't go to the hospitals where we are doctors at. What does that say today on the aspect of socio-economic? You've lived in two eras in a former Bantustan, where you might have seen the teachers that taught and their kids would have been in the same school as you. And where vis-a-vis now, where the ones that became well off and make the breakthrough decided we live in this society. What does it do to socio-economic transformation as it required in BE, except the fact that we donate 1% of our net profit after tax? Is that enough?
The problem is quite complex. I think your analysis lens is interesting. here's where I am, okay? What do we need in the country? We need electricity that is reliable, that is affordable, and over time that is sustainable. So if you think of transformation at its most fundamental level, we owe the poorest of the poor stable electricity, because if they have that, they have a chance. If somebody runs a small business, they have a chance to try to develop that. They have a chance to have their children go to school, have a little bit of warmth in winter, be able to study at night using electricity. So that is a far more fundamental aspect of transformation. So the society has to hold each of us accountable for that. Why do people run away from the schools in our Black areas where most of our people live? The truth be told, the quality of our education is appalling. It's poor. We rank on the World Economic Forum metric around out of 150 countries, if not slightly more, maybe 178 countries around the world, we rank worse than 100. Probably around, I don't remember the latest number now, probably around 120, 130. Ordinary people, when the quality of education is that bad, will know that and they will vote with their feet. So the teacher that teaches in a poor school where the quality of education is bad, they know it. We obviously should hold them accountable to it. We should hold SATU and COSATU generally accountable for the quality of education, as the same way we should hold government accountable. Improve that quality of education, more people will be there. So I think you are diagnosing the problem. The prescription that people should stay there is unfortunately mortally wounded, because unless you improve the quality of the outcomes in education, unless on a measurable basis we can compete with the Singapores of this world, every parent will try to do what is better for their children. It does not mean that we can't fix our education. It does not mean that we can't fix Eskom. It does not mean that we can't fix our municipalities, but that requires a different problem to be sorted out. And it's not a problem of resources. Most people say we don't have resources. It's a problem of leadership in terms of understanding what the objectives are and how we best get them. It's a problem of competence. With due respect, a lot of our colleagues, whether some in the private business, some in public businesses, do not really have the skill to do what they're doing. If you're going to compete with Singapore, if you're going to compete with South Korea, if you're going to compete with a number of countries across the world, we have to make sure that our competence levels are high, that our leadership is of a better quality. So I have no doubt we can fix Eskom. I have no doubt we can fix Transnet. I have no doubt we can fix MANAP. Absolutely no doubt about it. But it requires a different resource. That resource is not money. That resource is leadership and competence. So I would prescribe a different solution to your problem, not a solution to force people to stay where they are and have their children go into places where the education is better. I would say, let's try fix the quality of education. I aspire to Singapore. I aspire to South Korea. If you go there, you will see the quality of life with very little resources. Leadership is ethical, leadership is competent, and meritocracy is important. And they are now some of the best countries in the world. I don't aspire on an ideology to Cuba, because qualitatively, the life and what Cuba is able to provide is really poor. Very little. I'm going to be controversial, okay? I'm 60. I've got grandchildren. I have no reason to be politically correct. I'm a patriot. I would like our country to work. What we have to look for, the best in the world, and have to provide the best services. But we cannot be, from a political perspective, and I'm sorry to any political office holder who's on the call, we cannot do it through ideology. We've got to be pragmatic. We've got to look for solutions, and we've got to try to move our country forward. Our country is beautiful. Our people are lovely and friendly. I travel around the world, and every time I get into the South, there's a lifting that you can feel. We can do better in tourism. We can do better in energy. We can do better in technology. We have spots around the country where we have hubs of innovation and digital skills. Stellenbosch would be one. The Western Cape would be another. In Johannesburg, you have around Midrand a hub where we can be technologically very advanced. So my solution is very different. I'm not looking for social outcomes that are not underpinned by transformation in the makeup of the economy and the country. As I say, I'm going to be controversial. I'm old.
I think that's the reason for the talk in the definitely. Remember, we are here to learn, but also to say, where do we take it forward? Your generation would have played its own role. What's quite fascinating for me is that you mentioned Mentor Lee of Singapore.
Yeah.
He mentions these two aspects, meritocracy and pragmatism. Now, one of the things, and I think I'll bring this to you because you're also in wealth management. The biggest disempowerment during the previous dispensation was that people could not own property.
Yeah.
Now, how has it been that even till today, only on the 26th of June, Presidency started realizing that the Deeds Registries Act only applies to 20% of the population in the country? How has that been allowed like that?
Incompetence.
Because Lee, one of the first things he fixed in Singapore was the housing aspect.
Yeah. Property ownership is important. I'll refer you to a book by a very famous South American economist, Hernando de Soto. I think it's about Chile, if I'm not mistaken. The book is called The Mystery of Capital. And it really talks about how that economy transformed on the back of house ownership. Because with ownership, you get equity, you can borrow against that, and you're able to either pay for a bit of education or you're able to start a business. So ownership of property, that's why, for instance, in townships, there should not be a situation where our people don't own the houses they live in. I know in most cases we've made progress, but we should be making more progress. Ownership is important, and we have to find ways to increase ownership. Again, to be totally controversial, in traditional areas, I think we should be looking to transfer those properties into the hands of the individuals, because that way people own something and they can do something about it. So ownership is important. Obviously, in the economy, we have to get to a higher degree of ownership by people of color. But the best way to do that is for those with a level of skill, not only influence and access to political power, those with skill to have the opportunity to buy into the businesses they run. Because that way you will transform businesses, because they will be run and led by people who have particular social objectives. So ownership is critical, absolutely critical. But I would pair ownership with the ability to run, to run and to lead both businesses and institutions. I mean, we've done well in the public sector. You have the leadership of most of the higher education institutions in black hands, and they generally have done well. You look at UCT, you look at VETS. You have Zebulon Hlapo at VETS, a nuclear scientist of world renown, a member of a fellow rather of the Royal Society of Astronomy. So we need to run things, we need to own things, we need to aspire to to the highest values and outcomes and outputs in our country, measure ourselves globally on anything we do.
No, I'm happy with that. Maybe the reason why I asked about that, as you link up to ownership, is that we can own the other assets. I know the first set of BE deals, you were part of them. Maybe you could tell us what happened in those. Most of the people we knew when we grew aspiring for, we realized they got a raw deal. Now, the aspect today is our generation would be more educated in areas where our parents would not have been.
Yeah.
But to really get into the mainstream business, you need that property to really be funded, except if you go through IDC and all of those. But even them, they've got terms that commercial banks want.
Yeah.
But if you come from Kwakwa, you still sit with permission to occupy. And your parents don't really own the land where you stay. And that's the only property you've known all your life. How do we then move that? I think as Black professionals, seeing that, probably for our generation is worse, because we think the entire property sector has been financialized, where the only time you can get to own a property is when you buy it via the bank.
Yeah.
Or you might end up having to do what some of our people call state capture. You must try and rob as much money out of the government as possible to own some form of property. How do we manage that element of ownership?
Look, the answers are not easy because the challenges are complex and they are large, okay? So there's no magic wand that suddenly transfers large and significant property into other hands. Obviously, you can transfer land, but without the necessary skill, that land doesn't work. I mean, we've got in Mpumalanga, for instance, some of the most valuable export farming or farms that produce exports, and we transfer the ownership, as we should, to Black people, but they do not have the necessary skills and support, because you don't get those overnight, and those can go fallow. So the ownership thing is absolutely paramount, but it has to be accompanied by a level of significant skill. I come from the Free State, and I know the amount of farms that our people, thankfully, have been able to get into, but without the ability to run a farm. And I have a few people, some of my friends, who have taken into commercial farming, and they are not trying to buy 2% here or 2% there. Somebody says, I'm going to buy this farm, I'm going to live on the farm, and I'm going to make sure that this farm produces at a level that allows me to supply Pick and Pay, Woolworths and others, but also to export. But you have to make the choice, having got the ownership, that you need to dedicate your whole life to it. The problem with BEE, in my take, is this, that people tended to own small pieces of businesses they don't run. And clearly, when you buy into a share and you pay for it, which you have to, you are always going to be chasing the interest of it. So you are unlikely to make progress. So let's look at some of the most successful entrepreneurs, guys that are into billions, okay? You take, as an example, Brian Joffe. I don't know whether you've heard about Brian Joffe, of the Bidvest fame.
Yes.
That business is now run by a friend of mine, Fumi Madisa, and she's doing a fantastic piece of work. But it took Brian about 30 years to start from literally nothing. We know because Investec supported him at the time. Had an idea, bought a small business, a bakery, a set of bakeries, and out of that created some level of capital to buy more. And Bidvest today employs approximately 130,000 people. And that's only half of it, because the other half was de-merged. But it took 30 years of dedicated, single-handed application by him to start small and build big. The market value of Bidvest now is about 65 billion rand. The market value of Bitcorp, I think, is likely to be over 100 billion rand. But it took 30 years to do it. But what was required was not an investment of 3%, 5%, 7% in 10 different businesses you don't understand, you don't even sit on the boards of, or you are not an executive of. It took 30 years of application in a business where if it went wrong, he was completely gone and bankrupt. So as Black capitalists, if I may use that word unapologetically, we have to be prepared to throw everything we have into a business to make it successful over the long term. When we started in 2001, we put everything into TISO and took a 7.5 million rand loan from Investec to start. But why could I do that? Why could Nkunku and David do that? By 2001, I had 17 years of corporate experience. I had run a listed company. I had bought and sold copious amounts of businesses. I could go to a bank and I could raise that money because I had the skill and the likely probability of success. So sometimes our people, without the 17-year track record, try to do this type of thing. So I work at Investec, right? So what we do is the following. Normally, young people come into Investec, they learn what we do over 10, 15 years, and then they go out and do their own businesses. I can talk of a business called Tamela, where Vusi Mahlangu worked for us for over 10 years and then decided to go start his own business. You can never overemphasize my 17 years of preparation. You can never overemphasize Vusi Mahlangu's 10 years of preparation. He owns his business now, looks very successful. Even Patrice Motsepe worked as a commercial lawyer for about 20 years or so to get to a point where he was at the table when the opportunity to buy into Harmony's old gold mines came. He was there, but he had grafted for about 20 years as a lawyer. He was fortunate in that his family in the Northwest ran a spaza shop. He understood a little bit about making money and he had the desire to own a business, despite the fact that he was a partner at Bowman Gilfillan. So when you think of Patrice Motsepe and his billions, don't ever make the mistake of thinking that he dropped onto the sea and became successful. He had been there, he had gained the skill as a corporate lawyer, and he could identify opportunities and he's built on them. And he put everything into it. So ownership at all costs, I will say, but it has to be driven off the ability of our people to run businesses, whether it be a farm, whether it be a business. The people should, our people should not be investors. Our people should be owners who run the businesses. So that's the fundamental flaw, in my humble opinion, in the current Black economic empowerment legislation. So what your organization, the Black Management Forum, is doing is produce the quality of person that will be able after 10, 15 years to buy a business and run it and grow it over time.
Excellent what you mentioned. I think I will take from what Ubabu Lotendlovu used to say to some of us. He would say, we're building the Black capital class.
Yeah.
So that when the time comes that the PE deals are no more, remember we started from a position of a net zero. We had nothing. I should be coming to Ndate Fanititi and saying, Ndate Fanititi, this is my business. I need money. I need you to be a venture capitalist. I think the whole concept at that time of BE and bringing these people was to say, how do we get people also into the seat to learn? Which moves us now to management
BE was
control.
important, okay? BE was important. It's achieved something, but it's fallen short. So I must just be clear that it made a contribution, but it falls short of what the country requires. By the way, Ntate Mangena had a fantastic lecture in honor of Lotendlovu. Anyone who hasn't read that speech by Ntate Mangena should do so, because as you say, Lot was a pioneering figure and really was instrumental in the formation of Black Management Forum. Please read Tate Mangiana's lecture and speech about Lottendorf. Musibisi, I have about 8 minutes to go. I think we were scheduled to
Yes.
7 o'clock
No.
London time, and I have another commitment. So I wonder if we could round it off and maybe take 1 or 2 questions before.
I think you've covered most
we
of the
started a bit late. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. I think that's why we're discussing now management control, because I think that was important,
Yeah.
but we've covered it. I will allow Melili. I'm sure there's questions on the chat. I've seen a lot of comments. It's about 25. Melili, if you can take us through.
Yes, yes, we've got 3 questions. Let me start with the first one. Out of all the financial services out there, how did you decide on making the deal with Investec?
Interesting. At the time, as I said, we had started a business and we needed capital. As it happens, because of my track record, we also went to Liberty. And Liberty were prepared to loan us and advance to us a loan of 10 million rand. But they did not, in my view, have the capacity to support us in terms of investment support and deal generation in terms of networks. So we thought, and Liberty were large, Investec was smaller. So there would be a higher degree of interest in our success from a banking group, and their culture was quite an easy culture. At Standard Bank or Liberty or First Rand, we were dealing with junior people. At Investec, we dealt with the chief hunchos. So that is what made the difference in decision making. Find a group of people that would give you their best resources when you need them, as opposed to you being a small adjunct to their business. So that's how we made the particular choice in between the myriad potential funders. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. And then the second question is all about our BMF theme of lift as you rise. So we need to know, what are you doing to lift others, Mr. Titi?
Interesting question. I mean, obviously, the biggest driver of change is education. So I invest pretty significantly in education, both in terms of providing some bursaries. I mean, as an example, every year around my birthday, and I turned 60, as I said, we provide bursaries to 2 students at university, UCT, Wits, University of the North. That generally is about 256,000 or so. I'm just giving you an example. Around my birthday, again, I'm not quoting this because I'm trying to promote myself. I'm just trying to say that your money has to be where your mouth is. Provided about 500,000 rand to an education project that we support as Investec. Did the same in London, by the way, because there are poorer communities here. So I get involved in myriad number of educational efforts. I don't have as much time as I used to have to go into schools and to support schools. Used to support my alma mater, Silelekela, quite a lot when I was a bit young. I don't do that as much. And I lent my support to upcoming executives and business people. So yeah, there's a lot we can do. There's a lot that we continue to do.
Wow, now the questions are coming in some more. Does anybody have a comment to say so that we can just open the platform, and then we'll just allow for 3 questions, and then we'll allow our guest to leave us.
Yeah, I'm afraid I've got about 3 minutes. I have another commitment.
You have 3 minutes.
I have 3 minutes. I head up to 7 o'clock London time, and I have something else that I need to go to now. I'm already getting harassed on my phone.
Okay. No, thank you very
Tiki,
much.
Maybe for
Thank
me
you.
to thank you, I realized that there's one question.
Yeah.
We've got students
You
here,
should.
they say, what is the market cap of a company you run? I think that's more important to sum up the person
About
and the giant
80,
sitting with
about
you.
80 billion rand, 80.
8 billion rand.
80 billion, 80.
Okay. Both combined, the international business.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
No. Tata Titi, I think on behalf of BMF, I'll also thank Melili. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you so much for squeezing us. I think for us in the Free State, we're so excited and we'll call upon you. Don't get tired of us. As we navigate,
Yeah.
we'll choose our role models well. And we may be asking for more of your time. And if there are programs you want implemented in the Free State, the BMF is here to probably partner with you and assist in implementing those programs where you may not have time. I think that's a commitment we want to put as the BMF to say, we want you to be a household name here. We need to be more proud of people that come here, that come from our province, and begin to build what Stellenbosch and every other place has built. We'll choose a place, we'll build that, and then we'll produce all these people. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Msebeti. In closing, let me just acknowledge your work and Lily's work and the Black Management Forum in the efforts you have to promote Black excellence and to promote access to opportunity for Black professionals and Black people generally, but also the support networks that you form to support that progress and that work. I'm hugely an admirer of the work you do. Its importance in changing the fabric of our society and the fortunes of our nation. So well done, and thank you for the invitation, and thank you all who attended and listened. I appreciate you coming through. Hopefully you would have gained one or so level of assistance or value in the last 1.5 hours. Thank you so very much, and good night all.
Thank you very much. That was very, very inspirational. Those who have not joined BMF, please go to our website and follow us and make sure that you do join us. Thank you very much. Good night.